Welcome to the Department Chair Leadership Podcast, where the goal is to improve organizations and serve students one leader at a time. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Jochum. If you're a department chair in higher education or any type of educational leader, and you want to improve yourself to better serve and influence those you lead, you've come to the right place. Because the best way to improve an organization is to improve its leader. Let's get started. This podcast is going to add value to you and those you serve. Had a great conversation with Dr. Darrin Peppard. He's an author, leadership coach, consultant, and speaker focused on organizational culture and climate and growing emerging leaders. Darrin is the best-selling author of the book Road to Awesome and is the host of the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. As a recovering high school principal, Darrin shares strategies and lessons learned from 26 years in public education to help leaders gain clarity, find joy in their work, and walk in their purpose. Again, I promise you, you are going to find value in this, so I'm excited for you to learn from Dr. Darrin Peppard. All right, well, welcome back, friends, and hope you're doing well. Hey, don't hit stop, pause, or fast forward because you are not going to want to miss today's episode. In fact, get ready to either stop the treadmill, pull the car over, stop walking the dog, or whatever you're doing while you're listening, because trust me, you'll want to take some notes. As you probably heard me say before, leadership is leadership, and we can learn from everyone. And today we're fortunate to have Dr. Darrin Peppard, who I believe is the epitome of a leader, an educator, entrepreneur, and many other things. And we're honored to have him join us. So Darrin, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Hey, Chris, thank you so much for having me, man. It's going well. I like the as well as other things piece there. It's like this catch-all, I mean,
sure.
What all does Darrin do? I don't know. Lots of other things. I love that.
Well, let's get started, and hopefully listeners will get to learn a lot more about you and your background. And I say other things because you've worn a lot of hats throughout your career. So maybe the first question is for our listeners, who is Dr. Darrin Peppard, and what journey brought you to what you're doing today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that one. I would tell you who Dr. Darrin Peppard is he's a traveler of the road to awesome. And, it goes back to, my origin story, if you will, as a, high school kid that when I graduated from high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I went to college because that's just what you did, right? And didn't really know the direction that I wanted to take, and I just kind of bounced around a little bit, struggled a little bit here and there. And then I finally found, that passion, that thing that lit me up, that really, engaged me in my own learning journey. And that was making the move into being a secondary education teacher. And primarily, it wasn't like I can't wait to go be a teacher. It was, I wanted to go be a basketball coach. I was a basketball player in high school, and a friend of mine in college had asked me to come help him coach this elementary school girls basketball team. And so not high level X's and O's here. We're just talking, a bunch of fifth grade girls running around, but I was hooked, and that pushed me in the direction of public education. I spent 26 years in public education. I started as a middle school teacher. I taught middle school physical science. I taught high school science. I was a head basketball coach. I was a head tennis coach. And at a point, I had completed my master's degree in educational leadership, and my wife and my daughter and I wanted to move back to our home state, which is Wyoming. Go Pokes. And I was fortunate enough to land as an assistant principal at a high school in the southwest part of the state. From there, just had some incredible opportunities to learn and to grow and, to challenge myself and to challenge those around me. And through a couple other positions in that school, an additional assistant principal role where I was in charge of curriculum and instruction and special programs, all kinds of fun stuff, I became the high school principal. And I will tell you, Chris, I think it's one of the coolest jobs that I've ever had. I was my daughter's high school principal, which was a blast. And then I'm sure we'll get to this in a little bit, so I'll just graze right over the top of this, but I struggled my first year as a high school principal. I really did. I thought I had to like be everything to everybody. And we got a new superintendent in my second year, and he believed in leadership coaching, and he hired coaches for all of us. And I went from this guy that was just a nightmare to a guy who, was not a manager anymore. He was really a leader of people. And part of that was growing my leadership team, growing my assistant principals, my department heads, and really supporting them on their journey. And that led me to taking a superintendent job because I thought, hey, you know what? I'm going to have the opportunity to coach more leaders. Yeah. Anybody who's a superintendent that's listening is like, yeah, whatever, Darrin, you didn't have time for that. And I didn't. I really didn't. And so after 4 years as superintendent, the combination of my book being out, the speaking career really starting to take off, the opportunity to do professional development, which I know we'll talk about at a point, led me to doing what I do now. And that is simply, I am there to help leaders gain clarity, to walk in their purpose, and to just find some joy in their everyday leadership journey. So that's a long-winded way of sharing my journey, but I guess it's been a lengthy one. So in a nutshell, I'm an old guy traveling the road to awesome.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad you touched on that because for the people that are listening, and I think hopefully we have some listeners who are in all facets of educational leadership, but certainly if you're in higher education leadership, listen, this is for you. What Darrin talked about is finding your clarity, walking in purpose, finding joy. You need that in every job, and you need that in leadership. And one of the many reasons that I personally, even though I might be a little biased, my background is in teacher education and I started in K-12, but I always say if you want to learn where the best teaching takes place, go to the Teaching Factory, which is a public school, because people do it 180 days a year, 8 hours a day. It's tough. So I've told colleagues in the university level, you want to see great teaching, go talk to a public school teacher. I found the same thing. You want to find great leadership, you talk to public school administrators, because all of the things happen, and sometimes things that might take me a whole year or a career to encounter, maybe there were days what Darrin as a leader experienced all of them before lunch, both on the spectrum between awesome and often awful and all of that. So because of that, maybe let's just jump into that, because I wanted to talk about your mentoring and your coaching. Anyone that's a leader, if we're being honest, it's tough. And you talked about your struggles and then how, because of a good mentor, it not only enabled you to become a better leader and, from what I know, really turn a culture around, but now you're doing that for others. So let's just go ahead and talk about that journey and what you learned, and maybe advice that you would share with others and that you continue to learn working. Literally, folks, he works with administrators and school districts across the United States. So he has a wealth of information.
Yeah, so I like how you touched on that. It took me right back, that whole, what all I had to experience before lunchtime. It took me back to, I alluded to it quickly, but it's the perfect summary. The very first day that my leadership coach, my coach came to work with me at my school. He met me in the parking lot, and it was about 7:30. School started at 8 o'clock. He and I walked into the front door, and from where he parked at the front door to my office, which my office was probably 40 or 50 feet down the hallway, maybe 60 feet down the hallway. So you had to pass like 6 classrooms to get there and all that kind of stuff. So the day hadn't started yet. And from the time that Tom and I walked in the front door to when I got to my office with him, 5-minute walk, I think I had 8 teachers stop me needing something, 3 or 4 students. When I got into the back area by my office, my secretary stopped me and said, "Darrin, I need to talk to you about this. I got a question about this. You have 3 groups of parents out front angry about something to do with our physics curriculum, and my pushpin board probably had 7 or 8 notes on it." And in public education, we just call that Monday morning. That's just normal, right? You have so much that comes at you all the time. And this to me is why that clarity piece is so huge, because, again, you're right, Chris, I work with leaders all across the country, and there are a lot of common themes that I see. And I saw it in myself. I mean, the biggest thing, I mean, you want somebody who's an effective coach. You want somebody who's been there and done that, right? Like as a coach, I look at it as I am very well equipped to help the person I once was because I've already done that. I've already lived through it. So, I see people who just, they get so stuck in just the day to day. Like the work gets in the way of the work, right? In July and in August, as public school leaders, we've got these plans, we've got these goals. It's like, okay, we're going to impact student achievement by doing this. We're going to increase engagement in the classroom through this professional development for our teachers. We're going to whatever, right? Like the list of goals goes on and on. And somewhere in November, usually right, the Friday after Thanksgiving, your head comes above water and you take a deep breath and go, holy cow, I haven't done a thing yet. I haven't accomplished anything on my goals because all I'm doing is running around putting out fires. I'm chasing paperwork. I'm doing evaluations. I'm not doing the work that I want to do. I'm being a manager. I'm being a firefighter. I'm not being a leader. And that's where that clarity piece becomes just so critical. And it's not simple. To me, it was a huge piece, though, that took me from just 100% firefighter, guy who was living in what I call Superman syndrome. You have to be everything to everybody. When I was able to move out of that and into really focusing on being a leader, or at least living in the leadership world and maybe just visiting that firefighter world, that was huge. But you've got to figure out, and this is the challenge I ask every leader that I work with, what do you really care about? What really matters to you? What's really going to move the needle? And, in essence, what are you looking for? We talk to leaders all the time. Leaders are bombarded with, you got to get in classrooms, go be the instructional leader. Well, if you don't know what you're looking for, you're just taking up space, right? I mean, you've got to have a real clear focus of here's what I'm looking for. It's almost like going to DeFore's 4 questions of a PLC, right? What do we want our students to know and be able to do? How will we know if they do it? What if they can? What if they can't? That type of thing. I think I just butchered DeFore's 4 questions. Sorry, DeFore fans. I do know the questions. I just butchered them. But again, that clarity piece is, what are you really looking for? And how do you respond, right? How do you go and be intentional with that work? How do you go spend your time? How do you focus your communication? How do you ensure that you are being that efficient leader that's working on that work and not just stuck doing all of that firefighting, like waiting for the next crisis? Because that's something, unfortunately, and I see this a lot, Chris, in early career leaders. They're just, man, it's like they're just waiting for the next crisis instead of just go get in the classrooms, look for the things you're looking for, coach your teachers, support them, help them, celebrate them. A lot of them are doing great work. Don't think you have to go in and solve everything for them. Sometimes they just need to have good feedback and be asked good questions. So I really think I went way off the rails on that question, but it's something I'm clearly passionate about. So there you go.
No, I think I made some notes here, Darrin, because my background in K-12, and you've heard this, is probably the first day of teacher school, they told us a good teacher's a good thief. And what they meant by that was not breaking the law. But right. If somebody is doing something well, use it. And to the extent that I've been successful as a department chair, if somebody asks me what's my secret, I've taken a lot from people like yourself, K-12 leaders that I either worked for or that I've come to know. Because if you listen to what Darrin said, I love this. Know what you're looking for, or else you're just going to take up space. If you're in higher education, we focus on student engagement, student achievement, professional development for staff. It might look a little different, but they have to research. They have to be productive through service. In many ways, it's very similar. And I like what you said. It's common to think we're just here to put out the fires. One of my favorite leadership authors, I think John Maxwell has said this many times, is it's that balance between, are we repairing or preparing? And if I just show up and I'm just waiting to fix something, I don't have time to take a breath and say, okay, what's my vision? What's my plan? And so I really appreciate that you shared that.
Yeah, yeah. I want to jump on that just a little bit because, you know, when I finished my master's degree, like most who completed their master's in ed leadership, much of what we are taught is to be a servant leader, right? And I think that's what almost every administrator, not every, but almost every K-12 school administrator goes in and they say about the same thing. I don't want to lose touch with who I was in the classroom. I want to serve my teachers. I want to support my teachers. And that mindset can put us in a place where all we do is put out fires. Because as a classroom teacher, if you haven't seen what good administrators do, it's not just helping solve your classroom management challenges. You know, it's not just making sure the copier works, right? It's so much more than that. And that service mentality is phenomenal. It really is. I never want to take anything away from that. But it can set us up for failure if all we think we're supposed to do is just that. Just put out fires for teachers. So much of the role of the school administrator, the really good school administrator, is about planning. It is about preparation. It's about creating that compelling vision that not just I believe in, but that everybody else can see. And not just like this lofty, oh, someday. No, like in a year, in 3 years, this is where we're going to be. Let's breathe life into this. And now as the leader, I need to be spending my time ensuring that Chris feels like, hey, I know my part in this. And I know if I'm doing this, I will help us get there. You know, so yes, the repair or prepare, that's a perfect quote to go to. And I'm about 99% sure you're correct. That is John Maxwell. And it's so true. But we, again, I mean, and this, I don't think this is just true of school leaders. I think this is true of leaders in general. We want to serve, we want to help, and in education, we're pleasers. That's what we want, right? We want, when we step into a school leadership role, we want the teachers to appreciate us, to like us, and that means we need to help them and support them. And that's all true. But you also have to be out there ahead. So I like to reference it as leading from three positions: leading from the front, leading from the middle, and leading from the back. And there are times, and the great leaders, this is like the art of the leadership, understand which of those three places they need to be at any given time.
You said something here that really underscores one of the core reasons that I'm passionate about training all leaders, but certainly those that are in higher education. Because you said, you know, as a teacher, you could say as a professor, heck, you could say as somebody who's worked in a bank but hasn't made it to the C-suite yet. If you have not seen or experienced good leadership, then how do you know better? And I think even with the best of intentions, and I've always said in higher education, and this was probably true with you too. You were a great basketball coach. You were a great science teacher. I'll bet to some extent when you became principal, a lot of that you had to give that up. And you didn't show up anymore as the science expert or the coach. You were there to lead the school and deal with people problems. And so I want our listeners, I hope that resonates with you, is if we don't know any better, our default is to just do what we've seen. And that's why I think it's so important to get great leaders. And you said it. In your schools, in higher ed, the key words are planning, preparation, vision, mission. Two things we need to have a school are we need to have students and we need to have teachers. And so whether you're in K-12 or you're in higher ed, if you have those two things, this is for you because you are leading students and you're leading other people. Talk about then along those lines, because I really liked that. Let's just kind of jump into some of the things that oftentimes people have questions about or they're scared about as leaders. These are words that often that just happen to start with C. So maybe just give your thoughts, because you're really good on this. I think one of the best in the country right now, certainly in the K-12 space, that whole culture and clarity, because every leader, I don't care what you're leading, whether you want to or not, you affect and are affected by the culture. And if you're not aware of that, it's kind of like kids. They're going to find something to do with their extra time, right? And we can either be productive and make sure they do make good choices, or we can ignore it and maybe they make bad choices. So I just want our listeners to hear your thoughts on the culture and clarity as a leader.
Yeah, well, I think, to me, culture is the single most important piece. We can spend money on all kinds of different initiatives and professional development and training and technology, and if we don't have a culture that people feel like they're seen and they're heard and they're valued and they're trusted, we're never gonna reap the maximum benefit of anything that we've put the money into, right? To me, that's where it all begins. I started my leadership career at a high school as an assistant principal, and at the time, I certainly didn't realize it, but we were a pretty toxic culture because we were all about catching people doing things wrong. And so you just kind of alluded to it with regardless your role, you impact the culture and the culture impacts you as an employee. Right now, we're in a really difficult, challenging time. And this isn't just true in education. I think this is true across the board. Anybody who has employees has an employee shortage. And, the culture of your organization is in many ways what keeps people there or what has them leaving, right? Certainly money and benefits and all those things are very important. But if all things are equal, people are going to leave a culture where they don't feel seen, heard, valued, and trusted to go to find that. And I just feel like that's something that if leaders aren't intentional about building that type of culture, about ensuring that all voices are heard, and keep in mind when I say all voices are heard, being heard and getting your way are not the same thing. And leaders need to be able to hold that line. They need to be able to explain that to people. There were several times during my career where I had people who said, well, I never had a chance to be heard. Well, yes, you did. A lot of people had opportunity. I mean, we did all kinds of different activities to give people opportunities to be heard. But there's this misunderstanding of, well, if for me to be heard, I have to get my way. No, that's not true. And that's just how it is. But ultimately, we have to build cultures where people do really feel that sense of belonging, where, like I talked about earlier, where that compelling vision, where they feel like, hey, I know what my part is here. I know what my responsibility is. I know that the teacher next door to me has my back and I've got their back. And it's not about breeding this culture of competition and pitting each other against each other, but creating that we're all in this together type of mentality. And, some of the schools that I've seen that have really big culture challenges, that's what they have. They have this, like, one being, pitted against the other type of environment that's either been created intentionally or it's been created accidentally. The thing about our culture is, if we're not intentional about our culture will change, but it probably won't go in the direction we want. We've got to be, I talk about, being intentional. I talked about clarity and talk about, like being intentional with your time. Be intentional with your time on your culture just as much as you're intentional with your time being in classrooms, giving feedback, or your time working with, key community stakeholders or whatever it might be. If we're not focusing on our culture doesn't go the direction that we want. And what we end up with ultimately, and this loops back to kind of how you brought this in, is we can have employees who are engaged, or we can have employees who are compliant. And those engaged employees are going to be committed. That's what you really want to see. You want everybody to feel like, hey, I'm in on this. We're all working together. And I've been in schools where that's the case. And man, when you've got everybody or almost everybody pulling on the same end of the rope, it is just so powerful. It's incredible what you can accomplish. Now, I worked in a school as a teacher, and I would tell you, we were not the most talented teaching staff. But you know what? We were a unit. We were all together, and we did some incredible things, and I've worked in schools where that wasn't the case. We were pitted against each other, or it was our school versus the district office across town, or whatever. And yeah, you don't get that committed type of feeling, which means you don't get the results. Well, you get results; they're just not the results you want, right? You've got to have that commitment in order to get the results you want, and that comes back to building that culture where, again, I've said it several times, but everybody feels seen, heard, valued, and trusted.
What you said there, Darrin, is so applicable across all organizations, certainly in higher education. I would challenge anyone listening to either go to a university's strategic plan, mission, vision, look at the job description if they're hiring anyone from a professor to a president, and you are going to see in some way the ability to be a part of and to create a welcome, inclusive environment, be a good colleague. I kind of had to chuckle on what you said about you may not get your way, but it doesn't mean you didn't have input, because I think some of our listeners, oftentimes in my world, that is posed through two words, is transparency and honesty. As a leader, talk about how will you promote transparency, shared governance, and honesty. And I've also alluded to that as well, is that transparency doesn't mean that everyone sees everything all the time. Shared governance does not mean that everyone gets their way all of the time. If I ran for president and got 51% of the vote, they'd still call me president. And honesty is, some people, I think, view honesty at the extent to which they hear what they want to hear. And I'm saying that because I think as leaders with the best of intentions, certainly early on, we almost get in this state where if somebody is upset with me or my decision, then I feel upset. And I think just personally getting over that and realizing you can't please everybody. Statistically, you're not going to. Not everyone's going to have their way. If they did, I saw something online. I collect pictures, and it was a pizza, and it had like a turkey breast on one end, some M&Ms on the other side, and basically it said, this is what we would eat if everyone got their way. And I keep that because it reminds me that yes, there's a limit here. As we kind of close out, one thing that I want maybe you to touch on is, I know in my position, and I'm sure others in all areas of leadership, when you've coached people, and I'm sure the folks that you coach have called, and you name it, Darrin, I got a board meeting tomorrow night. It's not going to be fun. Darrin, I got to have a tough conversation. What's kind of the quick version that, how would you, especially our listeners, you may not know them personally, but if you know they're struggling, they got to have a tough conversation, they got to lean into conflict, what would you say to them to at least get them pointed in the right direction and maybe ultimately get to where they can pursue that conflict in a healthy manner?
Yeah, that's a big part of the leadership role, right? I mean, you may not do it a lot, but how you handle it speaks volumes of you as a leader. And I've had this conversation actually with a handful of people here over the last 2 or 3 months, and then I know I'm going to be having it quite a bit, going forward. But I think here are a couple of the keys when it comes to those difficult conversations, the tough conversations. Number one, you've got to focus on fact. Don't make it personal. Now, the person on the other end, it's going to be personal because you're talking about them. And if you expect them not to take it personal, you're fooling yourself. They're going to. Whether they know they've done something wrong or they don't think they've done something wrong, whatever the case might be, they're going to take it personal. So go in understanding that. So be empathetic, but make sure you have your facts straight. One thing that I think is this is a great strategy. I think for teachers in the classroom for helping students learn. I think this is a great strategy for leaders when having these tough conversations. It's a good strategy for teachers when they're working with parents. Use that third point. They may call it something like text as the expert. So like if we're using the text as the focal point. So there's me, there's you, and then there's the text, that third point, right? Your facts in those conversations are the third point. I like to even have them, on maybe a piece of paper or something on the desk so I can actually physically look at that, which draws their eye in. Then it becomes about this third point. Here are the facts about what's happening. Whether that's you're not getting the job done in the classroom or you've done some things that you shouldn't have done. Adult behaviors, just quick squirrel, adult behaviors are always the most challenging part of leadership. Kid behavior happens because kids are kids. Adult behavior happens and you just think, come on, what were you thinking here, right? But if it just becomes you and that person in that conversation, they're already taking it personal. Now they're going to make it personal about you. Focus on that third point. Hey, here are the facts. I'm not making up the facts. Here are the facts, right? Now, ultimately, you have to make a decision about that. And maybe that decision was made for you over at the HR or, at your district level or whatever. But ultimately, you've made a decision and you have to sit down and have this conversation with somebody about whether it's a plan for improvement or it's some type of remediation for damage that they have done, or it could even be termination of their employment. Be straightforward, be honest, don't beat around the bush, and honestly keep that part of the conversation fairly short. There's no reason to belabor what it is. But if you come in with your facts straight, if you're really clear, if you remember to breathe, I'll tell this quick story. The first time that I actually had to let someone go, and it was a no-brainer. It really, really was. Even that person knew they were going to lose their job. I think the meeting lasted about 5.5, 6 minutes, and I don't believe I breathed the entire time. I think I was ready to pass out. It just kind of got myself so wound up. And the director of the department in which that employee worked, when that employee left, he looked at me. He's like, "You can breathe now." I'm like, I know. It was the first time I had to terminate an employee. I hated it. I really did. But so understand that others have been through it. And when you have those hard conversations, they're not fun. But, ultimately make sure you got your facts straight. Keep it to the point. And honestly, if you have somebody you trust that you know is good at really keeping things confidential, rehearse the conversation if you can. If you go through it a couple of times, somebody that you trust, maybe if you're a principal, another principal across town, or, something like that you can just sit down and say, "Hey, let's talk this through. I need a little bit of help. I want to make sure that I'm ready for this." I think those are the important parts with those hard conversations. You'll get better at them with time. You don't want to get better at them because you don't want to have more of them, but you will. And like anything, with practice, you get a little bit better at it.
I promise you that helped people listening because it is so difficult. And I've even said before on previous episodes, yes, find a colleague, someone that you can trust. And it might seem weird at first. I did this early on as a chair. I had a couple trusted mentors, and we would role play those scenarios. And it really does help. I love what if folks listening haven't stopped to take notes, you're going to want to, because focus on the facts. Even though it's going to be personal for that person, don't turn it into something that seems like you're attacking them. And at times, maybe it doesn't have to be that long of a meeting. But I really appreciate that, because those are the things that people really, with the best of intentions, they go into a leadership role. And you probably heard this. You couldn't pay me enough to do what you do. It's probably on the days that they saw you had to do that.
Right. Yeah.
And so,
I maybe heard that once or twice. Yeah.
and I've said that too. There's great aspects to the lead. We'd probably do our job for free on the great days, the forward facing days where we get to do the fun things, and you earn your money on the hard days. But the only thing more expensive than a good leader is a bad one. So it all evens
that's
out.
So well said. So well said.
I want people listening here, and I'll give Darrin a chance to add to this, but hopefully my main goal, I wanted you to listen to Darrin and just his great insights. I also, for those in higher ed, I wanted to maybe let you realize in our profession, we talk all the time about being interdisciplinary and pulling from other sources and getting out of our silos. Friends, as leaders in higher ed, the equivalent to doing that is you've got to start learning from others. Leadership is a common theme, but they come at it from different perspectives. And so that's why colleagues and friends like Darrin are so valuable. I know that he has said things that will help you in higher ed. Look for those people. We're going to continue to have more of those on the podcast. I just want you to know that there's a lot that Darrin can do. He came to my campus in the fall semester and worked with both high school kids interested in teaching. We had about 100 kids on campus. It was great. He also worked with some current teachers, or some current teacher ed majors, I should say. Darrin, and this will be in the show notes, he's got a book out. He's got a wonderful, wonderful growing publishing company. If you have a manuscript that you're kind of shopping right now and are just really looking for a great practitioner fit, you might want to look at Roe Dawson Publishing, because it's got a great presence and footprint, and he's got some really good things. Those of you that happen to be in teacher prep, or maybe if you're not, share with your colleagues some great books in there you might want to use in classes. Darrin, what are some other things? I know what you can do for all organizations, but what are some other ways that if there are people listening within colleges and universities and they're interested, they really like what you have to say and your philosophy, what are some ways that either personally they can bring you in, or they might go to upper admin and say, I really think from a university or college level, Dr. Peppard can help us. What are some ways you can help them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, starting at that undergrad level, just continuing to, support and inspire this new generation of teachers. I just recently took on, in fact, this quite well, just recently took on a new project, as an adjunct professor teaching advanced classroom management. So, helping that current generation get out in a successful way and really feel like they are confident when they take that classroom for the first time, whether that's as a student teacher or, when they're actually handed the keys and they're going to get a paycheck, or like a real paycheck. So certainly there's that. At the graduate level, one of the reasons I do what I do goes back to having a leadership coach myself, and nothing against anything at the university level. I learned a lot in my master's program, in my doctorate program, but there are things that you need to hear from practitioners, or that you need to experience in the role. And certainly having done that and been a part of that, being able to work with other graduate level programs, to whether that's, as a guest speaker or as a keynote speaker or anything else we can imagine. I do workshops all the time with K-12 schools, with their leadership teams, 2-day workshops, 4-hour workshops, whatever, to, again, get those really important things down, like that clarity. How do I manage my time? How can I be intentional with what I'm doing so that I'm ensuring that I'm actually moving the needle? I think those are the big pieces right there. I would add too, you mentioned the book, Road to Awesome, The Journey of a Leader. I think it's a fantastic read for any, honestly, any level in education, but really for, those master's and doctorate level educational leaders or prospective educational leaders, to just really, again, get clear on what's important to them, and then how are they going to go and be intentional with that work.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and I will put all of Darrin's links in the show notes. Also, he has a great active presence on social media. He's a great follow. I'll put those in there as well. Just expand your network by following him. And again, his book, yes, we've used it with undergrads. It's pertinent with graduate students, so please check that out. So, Pep, I really thank you taking the time out of your busy schedule. It's hard to catch you home anymore because you are literally crossing the country, going all over speaking. But really thank you for your time. I know that you added value to leaders listening everywhere.
Well, I really appreciate that, Chris. And I'll be honest with you, this is one of those conversations. I love having these conversations because ultimately it helps me keep the saw sharp as well. So thank you for what you're doing. A great job with this podcast, and just continue to share that leadership information, because goodness knows we can all use it.
As always, thank you everyone for joining us once again on the Department Chair Leadership Podcast. Wish you well, and we will see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Department Chair Leadership Podcast. If you want to learn more about my leadership philosophy and how to be an effective chair, please consider my book, The Department Chair, A Practical Guide to Effective Leadership. You can find this and learn more about me by going to cjleadership.com. Also, please be sure to like this podcast, leave a review, and share with your colleagues. Thanks again for improving your organization and those you serve by improving yourself. Take care.